He walked a crying girl home in the rain, unaware she was a millionaire escaping an arranged marriage. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story, where a simple act of kindness in the rain might just change everything for a crying girl and the man who helped her. But little did he know, she was not just any girl. She was escaping a life she never chose. Her identity, her past, and her future, all hidden beneath her tears. What happens next will leave you in awe. Let's begin. It was a cold and rainy evening in the city. The rain came down in heavy sheets, turning the streets into rivers and the sidewalks into pools of water. The kind of rain that made you want to stay inside, curl up with a warm drink, and forget the world outside. But there was one person who wasn't hiding from the weather. Ethan Matthews, a man who had long since given up on finding warmth in life, walked briskly down the street. The last few months had been tough. Work had been demanding, his social life non-existent, and his mind constantly preoccupied with bills and responsibilities. He hardly noticed the rain as it soaked through his jacket and chilled him to the bone. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't see her at first. A young woman, standing alone at a bus stop, her shoulders shaking from more than just the cold. She was crying, tears mixing with the rain that streamed down her face. Ethan felt a tug in his chest. It wasn't often that he saw someone so vulnerable in public. Most people, especially in a city like this, hid their emotions well, burying them deep. But this girl, standing in the rain with no umbrella and no protection from the cold, seemed to wear her pain on her sleeve. Without thinking, Ethan approached her. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked. His voice warm, despite the chill in the air. The girl looked up, startled by his voice, and wiped her eyes, quickly. She shook her head, unable to form words at first. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to do next. "Come on," he said gently, taking off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. "Let me walk you home." She looked at him, unsure but desperate for kindness. She had no choice but to accept. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking as she spoke. Ethan gave a small nod, leading her away from the bus stop and into the pouring rain. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement filling the air between them. Ethan felt the weight of her sorrow without knowing the cause. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. As they walked, he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this point. The girl's hands trembled in the cold, but she didn't pull away. There was something about her that drew him in an innocence, a vulnerability that made him want to protect her, even if he didn't know her. He glanced at her again, trying to read her face, but she kept her eyes down, as if afraid to make eye contact. After a few more minutes, they arrived at a small, unassuming apartment building. The girl stopped in front of the door, hesitating. "I'll be fine," she said softly. "You don't have to stay." Ethan looked at her for a moment longer before nodding. "All right. But if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." She nodded, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "Thank you," she said again, her voice filled with gratitude. She quickly turned and disappeared inside, leaving Ethan standing alone in the rain, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but something about her had left an impression on him. But he didn't know that this was only the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. The next day, Ethan couldn't get the girl out of his mind. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just a moment of kindness, a simple act that anyone would have done. But there was something about her. The way her eyes had looked at him, full of sadness and fear, haunted him. He didn't know her name, but it felt like he should. He didn't know why, but it felt like he needed to help her. Ethan spent the rest of the day distracted, his thoughts drifting back to the girl in the rain, wondering what kind of life she had, what had caused her to be so lost in that moment. It was a quiet evening when his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat as he opened the text, expecting something trivial. Instead, The words made his breath catch. "Hi, Ethan. It's Sophie, the girl you helped last night. I just wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to, but you did, and I will never forget it. If you're free tomorrow, I'd love to meet and thank you properly. I owe you that much." Sophie. He hadn't known her name before, but now it felt like the world had shifted. He quickly typed out a reply, trying to sound casual, though his heart was racing. "Of course, Sophie. I'd like that. How about a coffee? I'm free at noon." The message sent, and Ethan sat back, his mind racing. What was this going to be? Was this just a simple thank you, or was there something more to this? The next day, Ethan arrived at the cafe early, his nerves getting the best of him. He hadn't been this anxious about meeting someone in a long time. He hadn't been on a proper date in months, and the thought of this encounter felt oddly important. He found a seat by the window, watching the rain pour down outside, just like the night he had met Sophie. The minutes dragged by until the door opened, and there she was. Sophie stepped in, looking just as beautiful as he remembered. She was wearing a light jacket, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was different, somehow more put together, less fragile than she had seemed the night before. She looked around for a moment, then caught sight of him and smiled. Her smile was soft but warm, and it made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He stood up to greet her, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Hi, Sophie," he said, his voice a little shaky. "I'm glad you could make it." She nodded, her smile widening as she sat down across from him. "Thank you for meeting me. I felt like I needed to properly thank you for last night." She paused, looking down at her hands for a moment before continuing. "I don't really know how to say this, but I've been thinking about what happened ever since. You don't know me, Ethan, but you helped me in a way no one else has. I don't have many people to rely on." Ethan listened, his heart tightening as he heard the vulnerability in her voice. There was a pain behind her words, something she wasn't saying outright, but it was there. He reached across the table, offering her a reassuring smile. "I'm glad I could help," he said gently. "You don't have to explain anything. I just saw someone who needed help, and I wanted to do what I could." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time since the night before. There was something unspoken between them, a connection that neither of them had expected. Sophie took a deep breath, and for a moment, it seemed like she was gathering her courage. "I wasn't just lost in the rain last night, Ethan," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I was running away." Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. Running away from what? Sophie looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting out the window as if she were looking for the right words. When she spoke again, it was with a quiet intensity. "I'm from a wealthy family. My father is the head of a major corporation. My life has been planned out for me since the moment I was born. I was supposed to marry someone I didn't choose. I couldn't do it. I couldn't live a life that wasn't my own." Ethan's mind was racing. The girl he had helped, the one who had seemed so lost, was from a wealthy family? From a world so different from his own? "You're a millionaire?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Sophie nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I am. But that doesn't mean my life is perfect. I'm not happy, Ethan. I was just trying to escape from a life that felt like a prison." Ethan didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of her words. He had never imagined that the girl he had helped in the rain would be living a life so different from his own. He had helped her because she was in need, not because of her wealth or status. And now, here she was, sharing a secret with him that she hadn't shared with anyone else. Sophie continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I know I don't deserve your kindness. I don't even know why I'm telling you all this. But I felt like I needed to. You were the only person who treated me like a normal person last night, like I wasn't just some rich girl with problems no one cares about." Ethan reached across the table again, his hand resting gently on hers. "Sophie, you deserve kindness, no matter who you are. You deserve to be happy, to live a life that's your own." She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had done something truly meaningful. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. Days passed, and Sophie and Ethan began to spend more time together, each meeting growing more personal, more intimate. Their connection deepened, and for Ethan, the weight of Sophie's secret had become a burden of its own. He found himself lost in thoughts of her, his mind racing every time he thought of the life she had shared with him. He was trying to understand it all, but the more he learned about her world, the more complicated it became. Sophie's wealth, her family's power, it all seemed so far removed from his simple, quiet life. Yet, with each passing day, Ethan found himself wanting to be part of it, to be there for her. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something bigger, something neither of them had expected. But he couldn't help but wonder if their worlds could ever truly come together. Sophie had spent so much of her life being controlled, being told who she was supposed to be, who she was supposed to marry, and what role she was meant to play in her family's empire. She had been running for so long. But now, as the days passed with Ethan, she started to feel like she could breathe again, like she could have a life of her own. One day, Sophie called Ethan, her voice a little shaken. "Ethan, I need to talk to you," she said, her words hurried. "Can you meet me? It's important." Ethan's heart raced as he agreed to meet her at the small park they often walked through. It was a place where they had shared quiet moments, where Sophie had begun to open up more about herself. When he arrived, Sophie was already there, sitting on a bench, under the shade of a tree. She looked pale, her eyes downcast. Ethan immediately felt a wave of concern. He rushed to her side, sitting beside her. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of worry. Sophie took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "My family, they found out," she said softly, her voice trembling. "They found out I'm not going through with the arranged marriage. They're furious, Ethan. They're threatening to cut me off, to make me disappear if I don't do what they say." Her words were like a punch to Ethan's gut. He had known Sophie's family was powerful, but he hadn't realized just how far their control over her extended. Sophie's face was filled with fear, but there was also something else in her eyes, determination. Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to face this alone," he said firmly. "I'm here for you, Sophie. Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." Sophie's eyes flickered with gratitude, but her voice was still filled with doubt. "I don't know if I can do this. They'll never accept me being with someone like you, Ethan. They'll never understand." Ethan squeezed her hand, looking into her eyes with a reassuring smile. "They don't have to understand. You're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself. You deserve to be happy, Sophie, no matter what anyone says." Sophie's lips trembled as she fought back tears. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this before, not like she was worth something. Ethan's words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the pain and fear that had taken root deep inside her. For the first time, Sophie allowed herself to believe that she had the power to choose her own future. She squeezed his hand back, a small but meaningful gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled softly, his heart swelling with affection for her. He wasn't sure what the future held for them, but in that moment, he knew he was willing to fight for her, to help her escape the life that had been forced upon her. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "I'm just here to help you find your way. We'll figure this out, Sophie, together." As the days passed, Sophie grew more confident in her decision to break free from the life her family had planned for her. With Ethan by her side, she felt like she had the strength to face whatever came next. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she no longer felt like she was running from something. Instead, she was moving towards something better, something real. Ethan, too, was starting to realize just how much he cared for Sophie. She had shown him a side of life he had never known, a side of himself he hadn't known existed. And as they continued to grow closer, Ethan found himself wondering what his life would look like with her in it. No longer just as a stranger he had helped in the rain, but as someone he loved, someone he wanted to spend his life with. They didn't know what would come next, but they were ready to face it together, no matter what the future held. As Sophie and Ethan navigated the challenges of their growing relationship, Sophie's resolve to break free from her family's expectations only grew stronger. The fear of her family's wrath still lingered, but with Ethan by her side, she felt a newfound sense of courage. Ethan, too, felt the weight of the situation, not just because he was falling deeper in love with Sophie, but because he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Sophie's family had immense power, and their control over her life was something he hadn't fully grasped until now. But every time he looked at Sophie, he knew there was nothing he wouldn't do to help her escape the life that had been thrust upon her. Their relationship, though still new and fragile, was starting to feel like a partnership. They were no longer just two people brought together by circumstance. They were building something real, something worth fighting for. One afternoon, Sophie received a call that would change everything. The moment she picked up the phone, she knew it was her father. "Sophie, where are you?" Her father's voice boomed through the phone, cold and commanding. "You haven't returned any of our calls. Your mother and I are waiting for you to come home." Sophie's heart raced as she stood in the middle of the apartment, the weight of her father's words pressing down on her. She could hear the anger in his voice, the disappointment, and she knew that no matter what she said, he would never understand. "I'm not coming home, Dad," she said, her voice steady but full of conviction. "I'm not going back to that life. I'm not marrying someone I don't love, and I'm not going to live my life the way you want me to. I'm going to live for myself." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sophie could almost hear the shock in her father's silence. "You're making a mistake, Sophie," he finally said, his voice a little quieter now but still firm. "You don't know what you're getting into. You'll regret this." Sophie's heart clenched, but she didn't back down. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said softly. "I'm choosing my own path, Dad, and I'm not going to regret it." She hung up the phone, her hands shaking, but her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. Ethan, who had been sitting in the other room, walked in, his face full of concern. "Sophie, what happened?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. Sophie smiled at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I finally told him," she said quietly. "I told him I'm not going back. I'm choosing my own life." Ethan moved toward her, wrapping his arms around her in a tight embrace. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Sophie pulled back, looking into his eyes. "I don't know what comes next, Ethan. But I know I want to face it with you. I want to build something real with you. I want to live the life I've always dreamed of, the life I deserve, and I want you by my side." Ethan's heart swelled at her words. He had never imagined he'd be standing here, holding Sophie like this, feeling more connected to her than he ever had to anyone in his life. He had always lived his life alone, never truly allowing himself to get close to anyone, but with Sophie, everything felt different. "You have me, Sophie," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I'll be here, no matter what happens." Sophie smiled, and in that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. She had chosen herself, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. The next few days were filled with difficult conversations, as Sophie began to cut ties with her family, leaving behind the life that had been carefully constructed for her. But even as the pressure mounted, she felt a sense of relief, a lightness in her chest that she hadn't known in years. Ethan stood by her every step of the way, offering his unwavering support. As the days turned into weeks, Sophie and Ethan began to find their rhythm, their bond growing stronger. The world around them still seemed uncertain, but together they faced it head-on, confident that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they could face them as a team. Sophie had given up everything she had known to be with Ethan, but in return, she was gaining something far more valuable: the freedom to live her life on her own terms, with the person she loved by her side. And for Ethan, the love he had found with Sophie was something he had never expected, something he had never thought possible. As they stood side by side, facing the uncertain future, they knew one thing for sure: whatever happened, they would face it together. As Sophie and Ethan continued their journey together, the weight of Sophie's decision to leave her past behind began to sink in. Each day felt like a new chapter in a story neither of them had expected to write, but one that was becoming more real with every passing moment. Despite the challenges, Sophie felt a sense of relief, like she was shedding the chains of her old life and stepping into a new world. But as the days went by, the pressure from her family only grew stronger. They weren't going to let her go so easily. Sophie's father had made it clear that he would stop at nothing to bring her back into the fold, to force her back into the life she had been so desperate to escape. It wasn't just about the arranged marriage anymore. It was about control, about maintaining the family's power and reputation, and Sophie had become the prize in a battle she never asked for. It was late one evening when Sophie received another call from her father. This time, there was an edge to his voice, a threat in every word. "Sophie, if you don't come back, there will be consequences," he said, his voice cold and calculated. "You have no idea what you're risking." Sophie's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to her father's words. It felt like a warning, but also a final attempt to make her feel small, to remind her of the life she was turning her back on. "I'm not coming back, Dad," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "I've made my decision. I'm not going to live a life that isn't mine. I'm not going to be a pawn in your games anymore." The line went silent for a moment, and Sophie could almost hear her father's disbelief. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. "You'll regret this, Sophie," he finally said, his voice low with anger. "But don't say I didn't warn you." Sophie ended the call, her hands shaking, but her heart still resolute. Ethan had been in the room when she received the call, and when he saw her face, he immediately knew something had changed. He walked over to her, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "Sophie," he said softly, "you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Sophie turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "I don't know what's coming, Ethan. I don't know what my family will do to me, to us." Ethan's voice was steady, filled with certainty. "We don't know what the future holds, Sophie. But I know one thing. We're in this together. I'm not going anywhere. You have me, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." Sophie smiled faintly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. In that moment, she realized just how much Ethan had become her anchor, the one person she could rely on no matter what. The world outside felt like it was closing in on them, but with Ethan by her side, she knew she could face anything. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Sophie continued to fight for her freedom, standing her ground against her family's demands, but the pressure was starting to take its toll. Ethan, too, felt the weight of the situation. He had never imagined that helping Sophie would lead to such an emotional battle, one that seemed to pull them both into a storm they weren't sure they could weather. It was a quiet evening when the storm finally hit. Sophie received a letter from her family's lawyers, threatening to strip her of everything she had inherited if she didn't comply with their wishes. It was a harsh reminder that the life she had chosen was not going to be easy, and the consequences of her decision were real. Sophie sat down at the table, the letter in her hands, her mind racing. Ethan walked over, taking a seat beside her. "What does it say?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sophie let out a long sigh, her shoulders slumping. "They're threatening to take everything from me, Ethan. My inheritance, my trust fund, everything." Ethan took the letter from her hands, reading it quickly, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. "This is insane," he muttered, his anger rising. "They can't just do this." Sophie nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of frustration and sadness. "They can, Ethan. They have all the power, but I'm not going to let them control me anymore." Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. "We'll fight this, Sophie. I don't care what they say. I'll stand by you no matter what." Sophie looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, she realized just how much she had come to rely on Ethan, how much he had become a part of her life. They had started this journey together, and now they were facing the storm side by side. The road ahead was uncertain. But Sophie knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let her family's control define her future. With Ethan by her side, she was ready to fight for the life she had always dreamed of, the life she deserved. And together, they would face whatever came next, knowing that their love and commitment to each other would be the strength that saw them through. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie and Ethan's bond only grew stronger. Despite the looming threat from Sophie's family, they found solace in each other. Every time Sophie faced a setback, Ethan was there, offering a comforting word, a hand to hold, or simply a quiet presence to remind her she wasn't alone. They spent their days strategizing, working together to figure out a way to protect Sophie's future without giving in to her family's pressure. But as the tension between Sophie and her family reached new heights, the reality of their situation became even clearer. Sophie had already made it known to her family that she wouldn't return to the life they had planned for her, and her father's anger was no longer just an empty threat. He had begun to take action, using his influence to put pressure on Sophie, and it was starting to take its toll. Sophie found herself caught in the crossfire between her love for Ethan and the weight of her family's expectations. She knew what she had to do, but the road ahead was not going to be easy. One afternoon, Sophie received a call from her lawyer. The tone of the conversation was different this time. There was no comforting reassurance, only cold, hard facts. Sophie listened intently as her lawyer explained that her family had initiated legal proceedings to gain control of her trust fund, and without the proper legal representation, Sophie could lose everything she had worked for, everything she had built for herself in the last few months. "You need to act fast, Sophie," the lawyer said. "The court date is set for next week, and we need to make sure we have a solid case. If we don't, your family will win, and you will lose control of your assets." Sophie hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the situation settle on her chest. Her father had always been a man of power, and he wasn't going to back down without a fight. But Sophie wasn't going to let that scare her. She had come too far to turn back now. Ethan could see the change in her immediately. The moment she walked into the apartment, he knew something was wrong. Sophie's face was pale, her eyes clouded with worry. Without a word, he walked over to her, pulling her into his arms. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Sophie took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "They're taking me to court," she said quietly. "My father's using everything he has to make sure I lose. I'm not just fighting for my freedom anymore, Ethan. I'm fighting for everything." Ethan pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to do this alone, Sophie," he said firmly. "I'm here no matter what. We'll fight this together." Sophie looked at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Ethan had never once backed away from her struggles. He had always been there, offering support, love, and strength. She couldn't imagine facing this without him by her side. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." Ethan smiled gently, cupping her face in his hands. "You'll never have to find out," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, late nights spent going over documents, and endless phone calls. Sophie and Ethan worked tirelessly to build a case that would protect her freedom and her future. As the court date approached, the pressure mounted, but Sophie never wavered. She was determined to face her family and win, not just for herself, but for the life she had dreamed of. The night before the hearing, Ethan held her in his arms, their hearts beating in sync. They were both exhausted, but they knew that tomorrow would be the turning point in their lives. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Ethan whispered, "I'm proud of you, Sophie. You've been so strong, and I'll be right there with you, every step of the way." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, her heart overflowing with love. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. "You've given me the strength to keep going. I don't think I could do this without you." Ethan kissed her forehead, his voice low and reassuring. "You're not doing this alone, Sophie. You never have been." The next morning, Sophie stood before the judge, the courtroom filled with tension. Her father was there, sitting across from her, his eyes cold and calculating. But Sophie stood tall, her heart steady, knowing that the person beside her, the person she loved, was the one who had given her the strength to get this far. The judge listened carefully, weighing the evidence, and after what felt like an eternity, he made his decision. "I have reviewed the case," the judge said, looking directly at Sophie. "I find in favor of the defendant, Sophie Westbrook. You are free to make your own decisions regarding your trust and your future." Sophie's heart soared, a wave of relief flooding through her. She had won. She had fought for her freedom, and she had taken control of her own life. As she turned to Ethan, her eyes met his, and she saw the pride and love in his gaze. They had done it, together. With the courtroom behind them, they stepped out into the sunlight, ready to face the world as partners, as equals, and as a team. Their journey was just beginning, but Sophie knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, they would face it together. With the court ruling in Sophie's favor, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. But it wasn't just relief. It was freedom, the kind of freedom she had fought so hard for, the kind she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for so long. She had won not just a legal battle, but a personal one. And the weight that had been pressing down on her for so long seemed to lift in that moment. Ethan stood beside her, his hand tightly holding hers, and for the first time since this all began, Sophie allowed herself to feel hope. As they walked out of the courtroom together, Sophie couldn't help but glance at Ethan. He had been her rock throughout this entire ordeal, and now, as they stood in the sunlight, it was clear that the life she had dreamed of was within reach. They weren't just two people fighting against the odds. They were two people who had found each other and had built something beautiful, something worth protecting. As the weeks went by, Sophie and Ethan began to plan their future. The legal battle was over, but there was still much to figure out. Sophie decided to leave her family's mansion, choosing to build a life that was truly her own, away from the control and pressure that had defined her past. Ethan was there every step of the way, helping her pack, offering words of encouragement, and making her laugh when the stress seemed too much to handle. He was her partner in every sense of the word, and she couldn't imagine facing this new chapter of her life without him by her side. The day they finally left the mansion, Sophie felt a strange sense of freedom. It was bittersweet, knowing that she was leaving behind everything she had once known. But the excitement of starting fresh with Ethan overshadowed any feelings of loss. They moved into a small apartment, cozy and full of possibilities, and began to create a home together. The transition wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when Sophie wondered if she had made the right choice, but every time she looked at Ethan, she knew she had. He had been with her through it all, and together, they were building a future that was all their own. Sophie started to work on her art again, something she had put on hold for far too long. She had always loved painting, but her family's expectations had pushed her dreams aside. Now, with the freedom to do what she loved, Sophie spent her days creating, finding peace and joy in every brushstroke. Ethan supported her every step of the way, encouraging her to follow her passion and never look back. One evening, as they sat together in their new apartment, Sophie looked at Ethan with a smile. "I never thought I'd be here, Ethan," she said softly. "I never thought I'd have a life like this, but I'm so glad I do. I'm so glad it's with you." Ethan turned to her, his eyes full of warmth and affection. "You deserve all of this, Sophie. You deserve to be happy, to live a life that's yours. I'm just glad I get to be a part of it." Sophie felt her heart swell with love for him. And in that moment, she knew that everything she had gone through, the pain, the fear, the struggle, had led her here, to this beautiful, imperfect life with the man she loved. She had fought for her freedom, and in doing so, she had found something even more precious, the love and support of someone who truly understood her. Their future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: they were in this together, and nothing would tear them apart. As the months passed, Sophie's art began to gain recognition, and she started to receive offers for her work. It was a dream come true, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for. She wasn't just a rich girl rebelling against her family. She was an artist, a woman who had the power to shape her own destiny. Ethan's business was also thriving, and together, they built a life that was full of love, passion, and purpose. They supported each other in every way, and no matter what challenges came their way, they faced them as a team. One afternoon, after a particularly successful exhibition of Sophie's work, Ethan took her hand and led her outside. They walked to a quiet spot near a fountain, where Ethan stopped and turned to face her. "Sophie," he said softly, "I know we've been through a lot, and I know the future is still uncertain, but I want you to know something. You are my everything. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Sophie's heart skipped a beat, and she felt tears well up in her eyes. She had never expected this moment, but now that it was here, she knew it was exactly what she wanted. "I love you too, Ethan," she whispered, "and I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life with you." Ethan smiled, pulling out a small box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a beautiful ring sparkling in the sunlight. "Will you marry me, Sophie?" he asked, his voice full of love and hope. Sophie's heart soared as she nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will marry you." And in that moment, as Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, Sophie knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. They had built a life, a love, and a future that was all their own. And nothing, not even the most powerful forces in the world, could tear them apart. As the months passed after their engagement, Sophie and Ethan settled into their new life with a sense of calm they had never known before. They had built something together, a love and trust that had weathered so many storms, and now, as they prepared for their wedding, they felt like they had finally found the peace they had both longed for. Their small apartment had transformed into a cozy home, filled with the warmth of shared moments, laughter, and dreams for the future. Sophie's art career continued to flourish, and she was finally living the life she had always wanted. She no longer felt like a prisoner to her family's expectations. She had taken control of her own destiny. Ethan, too, was thriving. His business was growing steadily, and he had found a sense of purpose in supporting Sophie's dreams, just as she had supported his. Together, they were building a life based on mutual respect, love, and a shared vision of the future. But even in the midst of their happiness, there were moments of doubt, especially for Sophie. She had come so far, but sometimes the echoes of her past would creep in, reminding her of the world she had left behind. One night, as they sat together on the couch, Sophie looked at Ethan with a concerned expression. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft with understanding. He knew what she was feeling. "You mean about leaving your family?" he asked gently. Sophie nodded, her gaze drifting to the window, where the city lights sparkled in the distance. "I love my life with you, Ethan. I really do. But sometimes, I wonder if I'll ever fully escape the pressure, the expectations. Will I ever really be free of them?" Ethan reached over and took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. "You are free, Sophie," he said with certainty. "You have created your own path, your own future, and nothing from the past can take that away from you. You've built this life, and you did it all on your own, and I'm so proud of you." Sophie smiled faintly, feeling a sense of reassurance wash over her. She had worked so hard to break free from the chains that had once bound her, and now, with Ethan by her side, she knew she was truly free. As they prepared for their wedding, Sophie felt a new sense of excitement. Their love had been tested in so many ways, but it had only grown stronger. Now, they were about to take the next step, to make a commitment to each other that would last a lifetime. The wedding was simple but beautiful, a celebration of their love and everything they had overcome together. As Sophie walked down the aisle, her heart swelled with emotion. She looked up at Ethan, standing at the altar, his eyes filled with love and pride. She could see the future in his eyes, the future they would build together, a future filled with love, laughter, and dreams. When it came time to say their vows, Sophie held Ethan's hands in hers, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ethan, I promise to always stand by you, to love you through all the challenges, and to build a life with you that is ours, no matter what comes our way. You are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I will always choose you." Ethan's eyes glistened as he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Sophie, you have shown me what it means to truly live, to live for love, and to fight for what matters. I promise to always support you, to stand by you, and to build a future with you. I choose you, now and forever." As they exchanged their vows, Sophie knew in her heart that this was the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. Their love had already been through so much, but they had come out stronger on the other side. They had faced their fears, their doubts, and their pasts, and now they were ready to build a life together. A life that was entirely their own. After the ceremony, as they stood together, hand in hand, Sophie felt a wave of joy and gratitude. She had finally found the happiness she had always dreamed of, and it was with Ethan, the man who had stood by her side through everything. Their journey was just beginning, but Sophie knew one thing for sure: they were unstoppable together. As they left the church, their hearts full of love and excitement for the future, Sophie couldn't help but smile. She had found her freedom, her love, and her future, and nothing, not even the power of her past, could ever take that away. Sophie and Ethan's life together after their wedding was nothing short of extraordinary. Every day was a new chapter filled with love, challenges, and the quiet joy of knowing they had each other. The pressures from Sophie's family seemed to fade into the background as they focused on building their life together. They traveled, explored new places, and shared countless moments that strengthened their bond. It wasn't always easy, but every hurdle they faced only made them more resilient. Sophie's art continued to flourish, and she even held her first solo exhibition, showcasing her unique perspective on the world. The response was overwhelming, and her confidence grew with each passing day. She had found her calling, something that had been buried for so long under the weight of her family's expectations. Now, she was living her truth. Ethan, too, continued to thrive. His business expanded, and his relationship with Sophie became the foundation of everything he did. He had never felt so fulfilled, so alive. They were partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other through everything life threw their way. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their apartment, overlooking the city lights, Sophie turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I always thought I had to choose between love and freedom, but I was wrong. With you, I have both." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with love for her. "I feel the same way," he replied, his voice steady but full of feeling. "You've shown me what it means to truly live, Sophie. To love without fear, to live without regret. I'm so grateful for you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the warmth of each other's presence. It was moments like this that reminded them both of how far they had come, and how much they had overcome to get to this point. They had built something beautiful, something real. Their love was no longer defined by their pasts, but by the life they were creating together. Time passed, and life continued to unfold before them. Sophie's art gained even more recognition, and she was invited to showcase her work in galleries around the world. It was a dream come true for her, but she never lost sight of what truly mattered: her love for Ethan and the life they had built together. Ethan, too, found success in ways he hadn't expected. He expanded his business, but he always made time for Sophie, for their life together. He realized that success meant nothing without love, without the person you wanted to share it with. As they celebrated their anniversary one year, Sophie looked at Ethan with a smile. "Can you believe it's been a year already?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "It feels like just yesterday we were standing at the altar, saying our vows." Ethan smiled back, his eyes twinkling with affection. "I can't believe how quickly time has passed, but at the same time, it feels like we've been together forever. I'm so proud of everything we've accomplished, Sophie, and I know this is just the beginning." Sophie nodded, her heart full of love for him. "I feel the same way. I never thought I'd find someone who truly understood me, who would stand by my side through everything. But I found that in you, Ethan, and I'll never take it for granted." They held each other close, savoring the quiet moments of their life together. They had faced so much, but they had come out stronger, more connected than ever before. And as they looked to the future, Sophie and Ethan knew one thing for sure: no matter what challenges they might face, they would face them together. They had already overcome so much, and their love had proven to be the strongest force of all. Sophie had found her freedom, her love, and her purpose, and she had found all of it with Ethan. Their story wasn't just about overcoming obstacles, it was about discovering what truly mattered: love, partnership, and the courage to live the life you were meant to live. As they walked hand in hand into the future, Sophie and Ethan knew that they had everything they needed to create a life filled with happiness, fulfillment, and most importantly, love. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it all, together.